Okay, welcome to our professional quest. We're going to talk about mentor opportunities with Pro Forma Futures. Matt Kushner is our guest, and he is going to introduce himself and talk about kind of how important Pro Forma Futures can be when you're trying to make connections in the finance world. So, Matt, with that, I'll let you take it away.
Great. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, everyone, for joining. I'm Matt Kushner, President and CEO of Pro Forma Futures. I graduated from Elon University in 2018 with degrees in finance and accounting. Started my career with Goldman in Salt Lake City in risk, then later pivoted to healthcare investment banking in the New York office. And currently, I work at Brynwood Partners as an associate on the investment team. We're a private equity firm that focuses on food and beverage investing. And just to give you an overview, Pro Forma Futures, the easiest way to think about our organization, we are a nonprofit comprised of about 150 people who have all been in your shoes, who all know how difficult it is to recruit for competitive roles in finance, consulting, and related fields as well. Our main goal is to really make the process easier for you. We all know how difficult it is to get in touch with industry professionals and just to learn what opportunities are available to you, how to start from a recruitment standpoint, and really maybe what roles fit your interests and your goals, because there really is a lot out there to explore. So a lot of logos on this page, but I'm sure if there's any firm that you've potentially thought about working for at some point in time, whether it be in investment banking, sales and trading, any of the professional roles you see here, we probably have someone who works at that firm currently or is an alumni of that firm who would be happy to give you some insights into what their day to day is like or connect you with some industry professionals at that company. And like I mentioned, it really is challenging to get in touch with people. When I was a student at Elon, and not just me, but I'm sure everyone on this page here went through the process of the cold outreach process, whether it be through LinkedIn, reaching out to alumni or people hoping for a response, or doing cold emailing, first name dot last name at firm.com, just crossing your fingers and hoping for a reply. It doesn't always work out. And that's really where we come in. If you go to our website, Pro Forma Futures, and go to the team page, you'll see all of us on our profiles have our personal email addresses listed. I will say we're all doing this on a volunteer basis, so you might not get an immediate reply, but your emails will be seen. We will reply to you, and we're happy to have a conversation. Whether you're someone who is a freshman just looking to understand what investment banking is, or what sales and trading is, or what consulting is, all the way to, hey, I have an interview coming up and could really appreciate or would really appreciate a mock interview to understand how the process will go. So we have conversations, across that spectrum and everywhere in between. And we're really just happy to jump on the phone and just be as helpful as we can to make sure you can get from point A to point B. And aside from our mentorship that we provide, which is pretty much everything I talked about, we also have phenomenal learning materials on our website, whether it's behavioral interview guides, technical interview guides, practice model tests, resume templates, you name it. We like to think of ourselves as a one-stop shop for all things recruitment. And I don't know if I mentioned this already, but everything is completely free, which some people find hard to believe, and I think really sets us apart and makes us unique. But really what we're doing here, using myself as a case study, all of us are really passionate about coming from non-target backgrounds or just how difficult it is to break into these industries in general. So with that being said, and with that, us having that understanding, we really want nothing more than to give you all the same opportunity that, we're grateful to have had. So I'll send this around after the fact. So don't worry about taking pictures or taking notes ferociously. But all that is to say, on this slide, we're a one-stop shop for all things recruiting, and we're really just happy to be helpful however we can be. So I'll do a quick overview of the finance industry overall, and I'll say for myself, I studied finance and accounting. I like to think that I had a good profile for competitive roles, but I didn't really know what roles were available to me. I didn't really know what investment banking was until after I graduated. And that's not my fault. I think it's just, it could be a function of what school you go to and how popular that career path is. So that's the other side of PFF that's super important, or Pro Forma Futures, we call PFF, is making sure everyone is aware of the opportunities that exist so that you're working towards the right goal. So in terms of the finance industry, you see the box hexagons here. That's where we have our, strongest representation from our mentors. Investment banking at the top. We'll talk about this in more detail, but it's really advising on the acquisition or sale of businesses, in addition to raising debt or equity financing in the capital markets. From an asset management perspective, easiest way to think about it is managing other people's money, whether it's in private equity, working at a hedge fund, wealth management firm, working with high net worth individuals. All those things fall into the bucket of asset management. And we'll talk about on the next slide, about that role in more detail, or those roles in more detail. Equity research, the name really speaks for itself. You're really conducting research for clients of an investment bank, generally on one industry in particular, and you'll cover certain companies. And if research is your thing, this could be a good opportunity for you. Corporate finance, what we like to call corporate finance, is really investment banking light. It's really less work, similar work as investment banking, but if you think about it, simply in corporate finance, let's say I was in corporate finance at Apple. How many companies is Apple going to acquire in a year? How many um, business segments is Apple going to sell in a year? How many times is Apple going to go public in a year? The answer is probably 0 or 1 to all of those things. Whereas in investment banking, you could work on 10 transactions in 1 year. Your role is to be an advisor to other companies. So naturally, it's going to be more active, and there's going to be more work to be done versus just working at one company in particular, which is really what corporate finance relates to. So just to touch upon work-life balance and compensation, you'll see investment banking is at the top. These numbers are a bit stale. I'd say first-year analysts at a bank like Goldman or JP Morgan, it depends on the year and how active the market is, but could probably get pretty close to 180 to 200,000 all in if you're a top performer. For some of the, I'll say, less prestigious banks, you're still getting paid a good amount of money, but maybe 10 to 20% less than that. And you're getting paid that much because you're working that much. The rumors are true. If you've thought about working in investment banking, it really is 80 to 100-hour weeks. It's not really sugarcoating it. It is what it is. I'd say the upside to that is, you learn a ton. Let's say I was in corporate finance and Kelly was in investment banking, and we graduated the first year. After 2 years of Kelly in banking and 2 years of me in corporate finance, Kelly has basically doubled my work experience just because of the pace of work and the amount of transaction experience she's gotten, versus in corporate finance, like I mentioned, maybe I only worked on 1 or 2 big transactions in that time period. Asset management, generally speaking, at the entry level, you could be paid a bit less. This is a pretty wide range because, let's say, wealth management, for example, right out of school, you might be making closer to the $45,000 to $60,000 range. But if you do break into private equity right out of school, it could certainly be in line with investment banking. The downside to getting into asset management right out of school, and generally why you see people get into investment banking first, then recruit to what people say the buy side, is because in investment banking, you're working on a whole host of transactions and you get a very wide skill set. Whereas in asset management, in private equity, for example, in my current role, all I do is really work on leverage buyout transactions, where at Goldman, I was working on mergers and acquisitions, divestitures, IPOs, a whole host of different kinds of advisory mandates that I wouldn't get that same experience in private equity. Equity research we talked about. In terms of a work-life balance perspective, it's definitely less challenging from an hour standpoint. I will say that there are spurts where you can certainly be working banking like hours, but it's pretty infrequent and it's not as consistent. Compensation pays well, and it is a very competitive role. And again, if you're someone who is more interested on the research side of things, it could be a good opportunity. And I will say, candidly, the work is more meaningful and thoughtful. versus investment banking. A lot of times in banking, I'm sure a lot of you have seen the memes with moving logos on PowerPoints, tracking things, sending around emails. That it's not an exaggeration. That's a lot of the work as an analyst, but you do get meaningful experience as well. But that's why it's a high volume of work, is you're doing a lot of, grunt work, for lack of a better word. Corporate finance, again, the compensation is really halved versus investment banking. And the easiest way to think about it is you're just doing half as much work. So that's really an overview of all the roles in the finance buckets and compensation. So the main point here on this slide is that it's really important to understand that there's a lot of roles that fall under investment banking. A lot of students and people generally, when they think about investment banking, they just think about mergers and acquisitions. Although that is a very popular and sought after seat to be in, that's not all you can do. And I'll say all of these roles are competitive and all set you up for success differently, depending on what you want to do from an exit opportunity perspective. You'll hear that word be thrown around, the exit opportunity. So I'll touch upon a couple of these, but mergers and acquisitions is really helping companies acquire other businesses or helping companies sell themselves. You'll hear the words sell side and buy side get tossed around. If I'm an investment banker working on the sell side, I'm helping a company sell themselves. Alternatively, if I'm working on the buy side, I am helping a company or a private equity firm acquire another business and helping them do that underwriting work and the diligence on the new company. Equity capital markets, just think IPO, initial public offering. You probably hear about it in the news when an exciting company goes public. They are raising money in the form of equity. So people like you and me can buy the stock through Fidelity, and those are dollars that are actually being raised that the company can use. Whereas debt capital markets, pretty much the opposite of an IPO, is raising debt. And this is raising debt in the public markets. So both of these boxes here, ECM and DCM, these are just ways that companies can raise money. The bottom left-hand corner, leverage finance, is a private company, so not public, that is raising debt financing. So those are the three buckets of really financing on this page. Those are the biggest buckets that people tend to focus on from a recruiting perspective. So I'll send this around so you could read about the rest at your leisure. But it's really important just to know that there's a lot of opportunities in investment banking, generally speaking, so that when you recruit, and this is the advice that I give to students that I mentor, be open-minded. Shoot for the stars and shoot for the top banks, the top roles that you might be interested in. But it's a really good idea to also put in some applications for roles that it's not your top choice, but something you still would be really excited to do. And I'll talk about my story in particular, but I started in risk in Salt Lake City with Goldman. If you told me when I was, in college that I'd be starting my career in Salt Lake City, I'd probably look at you like you had four heads. But, I'm not telling you that should be your plan A, but it is a viable plan B, me being the case in point. But it's just good to be aware of what other opportunities are out there at these banks. So just to talk about banking more specifically, there's an important distinction to be made. You'll hear, I know I'm throwing a lot of buzzwords, but another important concept to understand is product group versus coverage group. And I'll flip back to this page for a second. Everything on this page is a product. If I'm on the M&A advisory team, I am on a product team, and I don't care what industry I'm working with. I will sell a company in technology, in real estate, financial institutions, consumer. I don't care what industry it's in. I will be the M&A analyst and provide M&A advisory for that business. That's a product team. Alternatively, coverage, you'll see here, it's industry specific. So I'll use myself as an example. When I was at Goldman, I worked in healthcare, and I didn't do all of these things, but I did a lot of these things, all for healthcare companies. So I didn't care what the assignment was. If it was a healthcare company and it falls under the purview of the services that Goldman provides in its investment banking division, I was going to work on it. So that's just an important distinction to be made. between product and coverage. Don't get too fussed about whether you get into a product team or a coverage team. They're both very competitive. So again, go for your top choice. If you really want to do mergers and acquisitions, go do that. But if you get an offer to do debt capital markets or leverage finance, still a great offer and something you should consider. Here are just some of the banks you're probably familiar with, but it's good to just, do a quick Google search and just understand what banks are out there. There are a lot out there, not just the big names that you see on this page here. So it's just good to understand what the recruiting landscape looks like. In terms of down the line opportunities, there's I won't go through all of these, but the important point to make here is that investment banking is really sought after because it's a stamp of approval on your resume that really just tells the other person at the other side of the interview table, whatever role you might be interviewing for, that you're a hard worker, you get stuff done, you have the raw horsepower and stamina to be a good team player, and you just have a high level of aptitude. So all that is to say, if you want to go into private equity, work at a hedge fund, or work on the corporate side of things, or in a strategy role, or even just completely pivot to another industry altogether, it really sets you up nicely for success down the line. A lot of words on this page here. What I will say, the key takeaway is the sooner you start, the better. I confess that I didn't really know what investment banking was until after I graduated and really was late to the game. So take comfort in that if you are not a freshman and you're looking at this timeline and thinking, oh man, I'm already 3 years behind, don't worry. It's good that you know now, and we could talk about the steps to take in order to catch up, which is really just going to be full-time recruiting. But in any case, it's good to understand what the ideal process looks like. And again, I won't touch upon every bullet, but it's really freshman year, prepare and network. Sophomore year, you're going to be actually interviewing and preparing for interviews as you interview. And then ideally, you lock in an interview or you get an offer during your sophomore year that
But I think you muted.
Yeah, Matt, we just lost sound for you. Hang tight, everybody.
hopefully I wasn't on mute that long. Can you guys hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Hopefully I wasn't on mute too long. Should I go back a page or two?
It was just the end of the last page and the start of this one. So
Okay, got it. Well, just to recap, all I was saying here is that if you're late to the process, don't be discouraged. You can recruit full time. This is just meant to really explain what the ideal process looks like. You get an offer during your sophomore year for junior summer. You really are a rock star junior summer, and then you return full time. But again, there's ways to be creative about recruiting. If you're not a first year or sophomore and don't have that opportunity. This is really just to recap. Everything that's boxed here is where PFF can really help and be a resource to you. Use us to understand what roles are available to you. Start as soon as possible. Have a good understanding of why you're doing it. It's a really important point because if you are recruiting for a job at Wells Fargo, let's say, and someone asks you why you want to go into banking, you guys are all smart. You know the answer can't be, I want to get paid well. It has to be a thoughtful story that or explanation that really leaves the person believing why you want to go into the role. So, for example, I don't want to say bad, but a not great answer would be, my mom was an investment banker or is an investment banker. More, thoughtful response would be, I remember being at the dinner table when I was a kid, and my mom would explain to me what her day-to-day was like and talk to me about what transaction she was working on. And since then, I've always been really excited about what a career in investment banking might look like. So just try and spin it and be as thoughtful as you can be and be truthful. Um, and the more genuine you are, the better, the story will likely be, but it's important to have that nailed down. Goes without saying, prepare for interviews. No secret that these can be very technical. We have all the questions you need to know on our website, and these are all curated by us. We know how valuable your time is as a student. So we want to make sure you're really understanding the must and need to know questions so that you're prepared for the interview. And then after you ace those and master those, you can move on to the thousands of other questions that exist on certain websites. Network, of course, speak with not just PFF mentors, but also people in your network as well. Friends, family, friends, alumni, you'll understand as your career goes on how important networking is, not just for securing jobs, but being successful in your jobs, especially in finance. It really is all about your network. So it's good to practice that as a skill set now and just understand, how that process works and how to cultivate a network. Keep your grades up, get involved on campus, and if you can, take an intro to accounting course so that some of the technical questions will just become more natural because you've taken a whole semester of classes on it. So we talked about this, but really encourage you to go to the learning tab on our website. These are materials that, again, we curated because we know how much information exists. All these websites are helpful and really great, and all of the questions that we have on our website, these sites probably have them too. But you're not going to spend hundreds of hours reviewing thousands of questions. What we recommend you do is spend maybe still hundreds of hours, hopefully not, but a good amount of time studying these 50 to 100 questions before you venture off into, a dark tunnel of questions that you'll never really pick your head up from. If this is for you, start as soon as possible. I really can't stress it enough. Not suggesting you get off this call and pull an all-nighter and study all the technical interviews or questions you can, but allocate 10 to 20 minutes a day, bump that up to 30 minutes to an hour a day, just see what you're comfortable with and what works with your schedule. But really do recommend that you chip away, even if it's 10 minutes a day. Just recommend that you start as soon as you can, just so that you're better positioned a year from now. And the one point I'll make here, I know it's maybe dramatic to say start as soon as possible, but the other point to make also is that all of the recruiting, the good thing about recruiting for banking is that all the concepts are relevant. So it's not just an interview to understand, can this person understand certain technical aspects of the job? When you get on the desk day one, you might be asked to prepare a DCF model, or people might just throw around buzzwords like total enterprise value or valuation or certain things that you wouldn't know unless you prepared for the interviews. So don't view this as, I just need to do this as a barrier to entry. View it as, the more I understand these concepts, the better I will actually be as a summer analyst. So I think it's a good perspective to have. Again, having a good story is really important, and we have some samples on our website that you can take a look at. Can't stress it enough. Prepare for the interviews, both from a technical perspective and a qualitative perspective. Networking is super important. Again, also can't stress it enough. Don't just use PFF. We are a great resource and we want you to use us as a resource, but still recommend that you exhaust your network fully by doing even some of the annoying stuff I mentioned earlier, like LinkedIn outreach and cold outreach and meeting people in person for coffee. We launched a Discord channel recently. It's been about 6 to 8 months. We have over 100 active members. It's just a really good way to stay connected, and mentees will just post questions, and we have mentors that monitor the Discord, and we provide answers real time, or we try to be as real time as possible. So I'll send around a QR code for everyone to join if you're interested. And we'd appreciate if you could show your support by following our LinkedIn and subscribing to our YouTube. Aside from a support thing, it's great content, and we post job opportunities. We post learning opportunities. So it's just a good way for you to stay connected to an awesome community of people. If you are interested in becoming a campus ambassador and helping spread the word of PFF on your campus, just looking for a resume builder and a meaningful opportunity, you could reach out to proformafutures@gmail.com and include some of this information here. Again, it doesn't need to be perfect. If you're motivated and like our mission and helping students with diverse backgrounds break into competitive career paths, then this could be a fun opportunity for you. The last thing I'll mention, not to talk about myself too much, but I like to include this page just to kind of add some context to the whole non-target background aspect that we talk about at Pro Forma Futures. And a lot of the times, unfortunately, not to be pessimistic, but this is what I tell my mentees, is that sometimes things don't work out the way you expect it to. And that's why I stress how important it is. And I'll go back to this slide here. Have a plan B and even a plan C and D, because you might not get mergers and acquisitions, but there's a lot of different opportunities that you see in investment banking and even here in risk management, where I started my career, and commercial banking. There's a lot of jobs that are offered at banks. So it's just a really good idea to understand what's available to you, because if you look at my path, several different internships, Salt Lake City to New York in a risk/financing group, then eventually pivoting to investment banking, then to private equity. It's such a competitive field that it's not uncommon for people with backgrounds like mine or just a little off the beaten path to eventually make it to an investing role. So it's just, this is a good representation to really just give you comfort that if you're a junior on this call, a senior on this call, and this whole presentation, you've been thinking, man, like I really screwed this up. Don't have that mentality, because full-time recruiting is incredibly common. And there's a lot of different ways to recruit into the industry if that's what you're interested in. So thanks for your time. Really appreciate you listening and tuning in, and I'm happy to stick around for any questions.
Thanks, Matt. Before I launch into questions, and people, you can pop those in the chat if you want. You can take yourself off mute to ask whatever works best. But one of the things, of course, that we always stress with our students is just that importance of networking and, of course, of finding a mentor. Matt, can you talk a little bit more about how maybe that networking piece / mentorship piece, what do you want to separate it out or put it together, kind of helped you personally? And, we talk all the time. In fact, I just had somebody call me yesterday who I worked with 5 years ago and said, hey, there's this job that I think you might be good for. I don't know if you're in the market, but that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And I really couldn't agree more. Every single job that you see, or pivot, I'd say, on this page was a direct result of recruiting and networking appropriately. Verizon, I went to a career fair on campus, and there were a couple guys in my fraternity who had done this internship. And through those connections, I got connected with people at Verizon. They immediately knew I was interested, flagged my resume. That's how I got the job. PwC was through a relationship I had with a professor at Elon, so it's not just networking professionally, it's also using resources at school. And that professor connected me with a partner in Shanghai, and that worked appropriately and was able to recruit and get that role. Wells Fargo, went on LinkedIn. It was through the Elon Job Network, but went on LinkedIn and searched Wells Fargo, Elon, Wells Fargo, Charlotte, Wells Fargo Credit Group, every buzzword you could think of. Spoke with everyone that I was going to be interviewing with before I had the interview, just because of networking. They knew I was interested. That's how I got the job. I won't go through all these, but that's the theme. And I couldn't agree with Kelly more. The advice I give to my mentees is, if you apply to a job and don't network, you have to assume you're not going to get the job. I know it's a pessimistic outlook to have, but I think it's the right one to have, because one conversation can make all the difference, whether it's them formally flagging.
Oh, we lost Matt's sound again here. Let me message him.
Sorry, I think I disconnected.
It's okay, we got you.
Where did I leave off?
Oh, you said I'm not going to go through all of these, but I
Oh,
can't
okay.
emphasize enough how right I
Yeah.
am, everybody. That was the bottom line there. But yeah.
Yeah, I think the message is clear, but I just can't emphasize enough how important networking is. And you will just, and in case I cut out before, after I said this, you have to assume that if you're applying to a job and you don't network, you're not going to get it, which I know is a pessimistic outlook to have, but these jobs are competitive. There's so many people applying, so you really need to do what you can to make sure your resume sticks out of the pile.
Yeah, and I have to emphasize that as well. We have a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, but we get those students who are kind of come into our office and say, I've applied for 100 jobs and I haven't heard anything. And my first question is always, well, I have two questions. Are you tailoring your resume for each job you're applying for? And who are you networking with? And a lot of times there's kind of that light bulb moment of, oh, it didn't occur to me to, talk to people on the inside. Particularly, I mean, with LinkedIn
Mhm.
having that alumni tool where you can find people at all these companies who also graduated from George Mason, and that'll
Right.
give you kind of that in and commonality to reach out. I do have a question here in the chat. And it says, can Matt share some thoughts on additional credentials, particularly CFA and or MBA, such as the timing? Are they helpful, worth the time and money, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's a great question. I know it's not a great answer, but it really depends what you want to do. So, for example, for investment banking, having a CFA isn't that important. But if you want to work in equity research or work in investment management, well, not equity research, more so investment management, a CFA is more relevant. For my role, for example, I don't have any certifications like that. I will be pursuing my MBA, which I can talk about. But from an entry level perspective, CFA, it's not required. Obviously, it's a plus if you have it and people are impressed by it. But I wouldn't think of it as a barrier to entry. So if you're considering, um, you know, I would, if you're really passionate about investment banking, I would say I'd rather you spend your time recruiting and preparing for investment banking to become an investment banker versus study for the CFA, which is a hard certification to get, to then position yourself for recruiting for banking, if that makes sense.
Perfect. And I think too, one of the challenges that a lot of the students face is that, we've all got the same coursework under our belt, so to speak, when we graduate. So what is one way we can differentiate ourselves? I know you mentioned kind of some tips. I see it right here, of course, the internships and the grades up. Um, are there anything else that how I can stand apart kind of from a resume perspective?
I think, and that's why I think networking is so important because I haven't been a part of undergraduate recruiting in a while, but if I remember my own experience, all you can really do is keep your grades up, have good extracurriculars. I'd even say the coursework isn't even as relevant from a standing out perspective because if you're a finance student or an accounting student, that's, baseline. But there's even a lot of students who are successful in recruiting who are history majors or just study something different. That's why the interview exists so that you can prove that you've done your homework and have an understanding of things from a technical perspective. But again, if you do all these baseline things, which might seem obvious to you, but you know, having good grades isn't a you won't be precluded from recruiting if you have below a 3.5 GPA. It's a lot more helpful if it's hot as high as it can be. But assuming that even if you have a 3.8 plus GPA, you're involved on campus, you have leadership opportunities, you're an athlete, whatever your resume might look like, you have to assume the next person's going to have an equally impressive resume. So that's really why networking is so important. Because for these competitive roles, everyone's resume, I don't want to say more or less looks the same, but it kind of does. So it's really important to network to make sure your personality really comes out off the page because otherwise you're just going to be another name, which I know is a pessimistic outlook to have, but that's truly how I feel because of how successful our mentees and myself have been directly as a result of recruiting. or networking, I should say.
Yeah, and I would say for those of you who are still in the middle of your degree, that kind of joining the investment club and the other related clubs on student groups on campus, and adding, having that not only as a resume builder, but an opportunity to network with other people. And I know that they sometimes they head to New York and they do tours, and on-site tours of some of these major companies, and, get their foot in the door that way too. So to piggyback on what Matt is saying, of course, that network, you can assume that everybody else applying for that job is meeting the bare minimum requirements as well. And so it's going to be advantageous to you to network, again, whether that's adding to your resume through a student group, or again, networking with people in the group and finding other things that you can do. And even non-related, so of course, obviously that would be the best, but you can be involved in student groups, but have financial roles within those student groups too. That also helps you stand apart on a resume too. I don't see any more questions in here before we let Matt go. So I just want to double check. I'll say last call for questions. Oh, here's a good one. How do you recommend exploring whether or not investment banking is for me, considering the time crunch and wanting to start preparing for recruitment, but also wanting to ensure that it's the right career? And I think the answer is mentorship, but I'll let Matt.
Yeah, no, that's right. It's really to speak with not just our mentors, but understand what the day in the life is like and whether it's something you'd be really excited to do. I'm gonna say this, and I hate that I'm gonna say it, but if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. I doubt that's what banking will be for you. But if you're interested in it, and more importantly, if you're interested in the exit opportunities that are associated with it, it could be a really good place to start your career. But the only way you're really gonna know is if you have the conversations to understand what the opportunity looks like, both from an immediate opportunity perspective and from an exit opportunity perspective. So it's really just to talk to mentors.
I knew it.
Mhm.
Anybody else want to chime in here with questions before we let Matt go? I don't see any. And keep in mind, just like Matt said at the beginning, we will be emailing out the PowerPoint that was shared and the links to, how to become engaged with PFF and all that good stuff. So don't feel like this is your one and only chance to absorb all this information. So with
Definitely.
that, Matt, can't thank you enough for joining us again. And of course, we're going to have you back next semester. You can't escape us. And I just want to thank you for your time.
Of course. Thanks again for the opportunity. Feel free to reach out to me and the rest of our mentors, and hope everyone has a great rest of the evening.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye.